Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Wild. I'm American expat in Mexico currently, and this is my new friend. This is Rodrigo Rodriguez, and he is an immigration lawyer. He's going to be talking to us today about some changes to immigration law and visas, and I don't know, whatever we end up talking about. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Glad to have you here.
This nice interview.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes. Yeah, so we met at a. Do you need to jump out? Okay.
Sorry, somebody's leaving my office right now.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
I got him like during business hours, so we're really grateful that he's going to answer some of these questions. I tried to think of all the questions that people have, because I know a lot of you have left the U.S., a lot of you want to leave the U.S., and so we're going to kind of pick Rodrigo's brain. And yeah,
Happy to help.
So tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm an immigration lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
I study diplomacy and international law in the 90s.
Okay.
I also study to be a legal interpreter.
Okay.
And after my initial school years, I finished human rights diploma.
Okay.
And at the beginning, I thought my business was going to be more oriented to help Mexicans immigrate.
Right.
But because of the changes of the market, and it turned out that Mexico turns out to be a very good place to live, now I'm helping more people coming to Mexico. So now I'm a consultant both ways. I do immigration consultancy to people who want to go to other places, mm-hmm. like United States and Canada. And I also do consultancy for people who want to come to move here.
Okay.
In the early 2010, more or less, I did a master's degree in the University of New York for immigration to United States. Okay. And now I have to do all over again because the law in both countries have changed so much that you need to keep updating, especially the last two administrations with the last two presidents. Everything goes back and forth. So, and also, and that includes also Mexico.
See.
So, well, it's a never-ending process. Immigration, it turns out to be a very, very sensitive topic, and it's basically the autonomy of countries to have the decision over who they decide they can live in their territory or not. So mm-hmm. I'm happy to help people fulfilling that. I believe it's a human right. So I'm happy to help so people can achieve those goals.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, it is a human right. I don't want to get too far into this, but it's very interesting that we're still dividing the planet up into these arbitrary places, and that, you know, as human beings, like, we can't, it's our planet, but we can't go to certain places. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. But, you know, we've got to maintain some kind of order, right? Okay, so you mentioned the recent changes, well, really changes in the last few years, but I want to talk specifically about the recent changes in Mexican law for foreigners. And they changed the visa. They also have changed their immigration policies, and they got rid of one really popular, really easy way for mm-hmm. people to get residency. So which one of those do you want to talk about first?
We can talk a little bit about everything.
Okay.
In 2010, 2011, Mexico passed a new immigration law. Mm-hmm. So that's the law that is valid until today, in 2011.
Wow.
It's quite opposite to many of the approaches of the immigration in the world.
Okay.
First of all, immigration in Mexico is not viewed as something that can be criminalized. Every human being mm-hmm. is not illegal for physical presence with documents or without documents in a specific territory.
Okay.
If you are a slave, or if you have any restriction that affects your life mm-hmm. in a different country and you come to Mexico, mm-hmm. the Mexican Constitution protects your basic human rights.
Okay.
So you can obtain freedom, and Mexico has an entire structure to defend your human life. So that's
Interesting.
basically the spirit of immigration law in Mexico.
Okay.
Of course, one thing is what we say in the paper, in the Constitution, and how we instrument it is different.
Sure.
So after 2011, when we have this new immigration system, many people who are interested in coming to live, work, or simply invest money in Mexico, we have certain rules like every other country. And everything has to do with applying in the Mexican system of diplomatic posts. So you can go to any Mexican embassy and talk to the Mexican consular officials and tell them what your project is.
Okay.
And basically they can tell you what kind of what type of visa you need in order to achieve those goals in Mexico. However, in 2019, we were struck by COVID.
Right.
No? So after 2020, many Mexican consular offices were closed. Many countries, they have strict policies of human flows and mobility. So many people got stopped in Mexico. So many people could not go out. And it became very popular, the nomad,
Digital nomads.
the digital nomads who were able to live in different places without having to go back to their homes and having the problem that the Mexican consulate system could not approve visas because we were closed.
Right.
And Mexico's embassies were closed not because of Mexico. Mexico followed the guidance of protection for health. Yes.
Yeah.
So some offices were open, some offices were not. So Mexico, our most important country of provider of immigrants, which is United States, most of the consular offices were closed. Mexico opened a relief system in which you could apply for temporary residency.
And that's the RNE program, which stood for
the National Regularization System, the National Regularization Program.
Okay.
So this system basically the basic elements were that you needed to have a valid passport from your country, you needed to be in Mexico in 2020, and you needed to have an expired visa. Okay. With those three elements, Mexico would give you some relief and provide you a residency so you can have a normal life and access to many services that a resident needs. For example, if you're a tourist, it's very difficult to open a bank account, to be able to rent long term. And there is an international agreement that any person physically staying in a place more than 180 days, the International Organization of Immigration establishes that any human being having to stay more than 180 days in one place is no longer a visitor. It's like the scientific amount of days in which people are considered residents.
Interesting.
No, because with that time, people develop links, develop community, establish a series of opportunity cost in the place that you are staying, etc. So Mexico basically decided to grant that right to the people who overstay 180 days. Right. As I mentioned, there's not a crime in overstaying a visa in Mexico. It's not illegal.
But there's a fine for it.
There is.
It's a small fine, or it was before.
It is considered an administrative fault. No, you overstay a visa. It's like you cross a red line, a red light. It's something that is not a big deal. Right. And of course, Mexico imposes a little fine, and it used to give you the opportunity to change your status and become resident if you wanted to.
Right. That was the R&E program.
And it was working from 2021
Mhm.
until March 14 this year, 2025.
Yeah, and was that, I assume that it was a direct consequence of Trump and all the stuff that the US is doing.
People think that.
Okay.
And I don't think it's only that.
Okay.
Maybe the difficulties of negotiation between the new administration and the Mexican administration in terms of commitments in immigration,
Mhm.
because never before has Mexico been so pushed to control immigration in order to achieve goals for a third party.
Right.
No, so Mexico has been asked to participate actively as a partner to prevent illegal immigration with our neighbor. So Mexico received a tremendous amount of pressure or threats.
Right. Let's be honest.
And maybe as part of that, Mexico has had to develop mechanisms to make it less appealing,
Right.
the possibility for people to come and stay.
Mhm.
That's one thing.
Mhm.
Another thing is that Mexico itself had a change of administration.
Right.
We need to remember that our current president took office in December,
Right.
and the new officers are taking the new positions in office,
Mhm.
and it's always natural that the
Changes.
new administrations change policies, make calculations, etc.
Mhm.
And the national program of regularization had to do with COVID.
Right.
And it was clear that without having the emergency, because we agree that we no longer have the emergency,
Mhm.
COVID is no longer an issue,
God.
and there was no reason to have that program.
Right.
That doesn't mean that Mexico can create or develop new systems.
Right.
No, we have, as United States has these executive orders, the Mexican president can also provide new special programs to help people obtain residency. Every president has provided mechanism of relief because undocumented immigration is very common, and Mexico receives a permanent flow of immigrants who end up not having a proper visa. Right. So usually every administration provides a relief program.
Okay.
The program that used to be in place had to do with COVID.
Mhm.
We are hoping we are going to get a new program soon.
Okay.
But in the meantime, basically we go back to the law,
Right.
that establishes that in order to obtain a residency status in Mexico, you need to apply for it in the consular
In your country of origin.
in the country of origin, or in the country where you can be a legal visitor.
Okay.
So if you, for example, you are American, if you can go to Belize without any problem, or Guatemala, or Canada, or Cuba,
Okay.
you can go to the Mexican consular post there and request a visa.
Interesting. Now, so I've heard from people who've gone through the process that in the States, it's very different. Each consulate treats you very different, and they will give you different numbers for like your income, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that the consulate in Vegas, in Las Vegas, is very friendly and not so. I don't know. Have you found that to be true?
Yes. The problem is that every consular or consular post, every diplomatic member abroad,
Mhm.
the Constitution gives them a right to decide the best for the country.
Interesting.
Yes. So even though we have a basic guidance,
Mhm.
it doesn't. It is not like a recipe.
Right.
No, it's not something fixed.
Right.
They can apply a certain degree of criteria.
Okay.
Some ambassadors or some consular officers are more friendly than others.
Mhm.
And there are many elements involving your profile, the type of activity you want to do, the outcome, the approach, the report during the interview. Many things have to do in order for the consular officer grant or deny the visa.
So it's not just your paperwork.
It's
So
not the paperwork.
Is that something that you coach your clients on? Yeah, because I would think that you can get the paperwork right, but if you mess up one of those diplomacy things, you could have problems.
I have heard stories of people who yell at the consular officer because they had all the necessary documentation and basically they said no. And Mexico is not a right.
Right.
No, it's a privilege.
Exactly.
So you are applying to be granted that privilege.
Right.
And if you are not even friendly to the consular officer, what do you expect for no? And right now, something that is very incredible, I have heard clients that they have been denied because they have never been to Mexico before.
Right.
And I think it makes sense. Why do you want to move to a place that you have never been?
Yeah.
No? So yes, I think people, those are the not very common cases.
Sure.
Because most Americans, they know at least Acapulco or Cancun.
Right.
Mexico has a long story of being a destination for more American visitors, you know? So, but some people, they just decided one day, I will go to Mexico, and they have never been here. They don't know what it is like. And I imagine the poor immigration officers, they are scratching their heads and thinking, so you don't know the country? And what makes you believe? Yes.
Not just because, so it's still right now that they can give you up to 180 days on your tourist visa. Is that correct?
You can come as a visitor without any problem, and you will get 180 days without any, you don't even need a consular visit. You just grab your passport, come to Mexico, and tell that information to the immigration officers at your entry at the airport, and they will give you a visitor visa right away, usually for 180 days.
And here's the thing though. So what started happening with friends last year is that they had, many of them had gone in and out. They had done what's called border runs or visa runs. And Mexico tolerated that for a long time. And but one person had just gotten his residency, but he had to go back to the States. And when he came back, they gave him 45 days on his visa. And he was just about to get his, residency. Another friend who was going through the process to get dual citizenship because her parents were born here. She was born in the US. And when she came back, they only gave her 45 days. So they stopped automatically giving the 180 days. And it was never an entitled thing, as some people thought that it was. It was just very common. When I came back the second time, because I've been here for almost a year, but I went back to the States for a few weeks. They really quizzed me. They're like, well, how many days do you want? And I said, well, I want 180. And they said, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm visiting a bunch of different friends. I didn't tell them I was kind of living here. And I'm like, I'm just visiting. And they said, well, where are you going? And I had to rattle off the name of like 5 different cities. And I think she gave me 175 days.
Okay.
So it's kind of how you present it. And so I was talking to someone who has lived here for, I think, 7 years, and they have their residency and everything. But I said, this is in March. I'm like, they've changed a lot of things. We're not going to be able to do border runs anymore. And his response was, we've been hearing this for years and it never happens. I don't think it's that serious. What's your opinion?
Well, it depends on the government.
Okay.
Some governments are easier than others.
Sure.
And we know that for experience with what's happening now with the specific personality of the president, no? And I honestly believe that there is also national interest.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth of the matter is Mexico has definitely certain degree of dependency on immigrants in or visitors in certain areas of our industry. Definitely, we need visitors for our tourist facilities. No, we need people in Cancun. We need people. So I don't think it's going to be that strict.
Okay.
Especially if you are if your profile is like that, somebody who comes and enjoys a vacation in Puerto Vallarta or in any touristic destination. I believe that Mexico, on the other hand, really wants to put some kind of order to people who are definitely living in Mexico.
Right.
Because there is a special study that establishes that once you are in Mexico, you end up developing a living. Mm-hmm. And of course, you spend your money here, but you're also providing somehow services here.
Right.
And there is a very important group of foreigners coming to Mexico and taking Mexican jobs.
No, that doesn't work.
Well, I don't know if it works or it doesn't work. I believe that if you are good in your profession, it's okay that you can exercise your profession here.
Sure.
But as any other country, you are entitled to protect Mexican jobs.
Yep.
And in case you are going to get a job in Mexico, you have to provide this additional skill, ability or technical experience. Right. I mean, if you are a fantastic brain surgeon, we want you here.
Sure.
No? But if you're going to be a waiter or a receptionist,
right?
No, or just a house taker,
right?
Or a dog walker. Those are jobs that can be perfectly done by not skilled Mexicans, which we have a lot.
Sure.
No, and we have a very big amount of level of poverty.
Right.
It's not like, well, those jobs are not taken by Mexicans. No, we could provide those jobs to Mexicans, sure. But evidently somehow certain people who may not have permission to do that, they develop networks and things, right. etc., and they end up making money in Mexico, not paying taxes, etc. Right. So I think Mexico really wants to put certain degree of order to that kind of immigration.
Yeah,
you know?
Especially because there are more and more Americans and Canadians coming here, not just America and Canadians. But one of the things when I got here last year, I was like, wow, you hear all this stuff about, there's all these people who's immigrating to the US and they're taking over the US. And I'm like, Mexico's going to build a wall. There's a lot of Americans here. I'm like, nobody, all we hear in the US is about all the people coming to the US, and there are people coming to the US, but they don't talk about how many Americans are leaving and going lots of places, but a lot of us have come to Mexico. Thank you for that overview. Okay, so the best process for getting residency is just go to a country that you are legal, you have a legal right to be there, and go to a Mexican consulate. And we talked about the requirements can vary depending on what consulate you go to. How do you foresee the requirements and process changing like in the next year or so? Do you feel like it's going to get more complicated?
I don't think it's going to be more complicated than it is now.
Okay.
Right now, we have like the perfect storm because the level of income, Mexico wants people to come to Mexico without having or facing economic trouble.
Absolutely.
No, we don't want people to become homeless here.
Right. No.
No, we want people who, if they want to come, of course. The Mexican level of expenses, I mean, the cost of living in Mexico is very attractive compared to many cities in the US. So if you make $1,000, of course, you're going to be living in a better way in Mexico than in the United States.
Right.
But if you don't make enough to be above the standard of poverty in Mexico.
Right.
Especially because certain services, even though they are not more expensive, they can be expensive if you don't have
Sure.
social security, for example, medical services,
Mhm.
etc. If you have an accident or you need an operation and you don't have the network of protection that you have in your country,
Mhm.
an operation in Mexico, of course, is not going to be as expensive as in the United States, but it's going to be expensive.
Regardless, and the medical care is better here. It's less expensive than the US, even without insurance, and it's better.
But whatever, let's
It's
say,
still expensive.
let's say I just had a friend who had to pay $7,000 for a procedure. He had a stroke.
Okay, 7,000 US.
7,000 US.
Okay.
What he paid for 3 weeks in intensive care,
Mhm.
and from the beginning until he was completely out of the hospital, they pay $7,000. $7,000 is 1 day in an intensive unit care in the United States.
At least.
So it's not that expensive compared to the US, but if you don't even have that,
Right,
you become in trouble.
exactly.
You know? So Mexico wants people to, if they are moving here, they are at least above the level of poverty.
Right, they
you know?
need to be financially stable and
Exactly.
ideally have a job that's not taking jobs from
Or job
Mexicans.
or already a pension that
Right.
is going to help them live with dignity. You know?
Right, right.
To be able to afford care,
Mhm.
transportation, electricity, etc. So
And have that cushion in case of accidents or illness or anything like that. No, and that totally
and
makes sense.
in 2011, the amount of dollars and pesos that were required to move to Mexico were completely reasonable,
Right.
because it was fixed to the value of the dollar of 2011
Mhm.
and the value of minimum wage.
Okay.
And as I was saying, right now it's a perfect storm because the new government in Mexico has done a good job increasing minimum wage.
Good, good.
So now the minimum wage was in 2011, which is the calculation fees that were put in the Constitution in the immigration law then. The minimum wage in 2011 was $4 a day.
Okay.
That was the minimum wage. The minimum wage today is $16 a day.
Oh wow. Okay.
So it jumped from 4
Right.
to
4
16.
400%.
No,
Yeah.
so that's one thing. What makes it harder, and the second part is unbelievably, the Mexican peso has been extremely strong
Mhm.
in the last years.
Mhm.
So we have a perfect storm. The peso is strong, and the minimum wage is higher, which means that now the amount of dollars that you need to comply are very high.
Yep.
It jumped from you used to need $1,800 a month
Mhm.
to be temporary,
Right.
and now it's about 4,000.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That's
No.
what I've heard. Well, and we're more depending on which consulate.
Depending on which company. So, how many people make $4,000 a month in the United States? Where they are fewer than the ones that make 1,800.
Mm-hmm.
And could you live with $1,800 a month in Mexico? Yes.
Yeah.
But right now, that is not enough to be approved.
Right.
So if you have 4,000, trust me, you will live in Mexico like a king.
Right.
Not even Mexicans, we have that income, no? But that's what establishes the Constitution right now. So I don't think it's going to become harder, because then it will make it impossible. At the contrary, I think the Mexican government is going to change the values, and it's going to take the minimum wage out of the equation and establish a dollar fee, an international dollar fee amount. And hopefully they establish that soon, because I think it's too much money. You could perfectly live in Mexico with at least $1,500, depending on the city.
Right, depending on the city, and if you were just very mindful of your money, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, if you are a big spender, you can bring as much as you want.
Right. Okay, so a couple more questions. Do you still have time?
Of
I'm
course,
just infringing on this
as
man's time.
much time as you want.
Okay, so this is something that when I started this channel was talking about how the attitudes of Mexicans and specifically Yucatecans have changed toward people from the US and why that's happening. And I get it. Like I get it. We were talking about entitlement. I know that there's assholes everywhere. There's great people in every country and there's assholes everywhere. But I know that Americans have a very bad stereotype for good reason, earned a reputation for coming to other countries and being very entitled. And I've run into a couple of those. Most of the people I've come to are respectful and want to, learn the culture and all that kind of stuff. But have you seen the attitudes changing toward people from the US? And how so?
Well, no. The majority of people are very nice.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
I actually appreciate many activities that the expat community engages.
Mm-hmm.
I see people very involved in many charities.
Mm-hmm.
I see people from creating opportunities of education in educational systems in beach towns, or people dedicating a lot of time and energy and money to look after turtles, wildlife, dogs, cats. If you see the board of patrons sponsoring arts, like for example in the Philharmonic Orchestra of Yucatan, 70% are foreigners.
Okay.
So the foreign community has lived a long honeymoon with Mexico. And I believe that's the feeling. Most expats in Mexico and in Yucatan feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
They feel happy, and they are embraced by the community, and they have meaningful and nice relationship with their everyday neighbors, somebody who cleans up their homes, or a neighbor who they park their cars next door, etc. Of course, there are always assholes, always. And of course, there are always people who believe they are entitled, but that runs both ways.
It does.
I believe some expats have gone crazy, thinking that the beach is only theirs, or the street is only theirs. And I see a lot of hate, especially on social media, of many Mexicans expressing terribly whenever but because of course there is this sentiment of anti-Yankee that it always raises because of the nature of the relationships of the United States with the world and all that. But social media is not real action. Sure. And I have never seen a Mexican taking an action against any foreigner just because he's a foreigner.
Right. It's like there was something that set that off if it happened. I haven't witnessed any violence. I have heard 2 stories from a person that admittedly I did not know very well, that said that there were some college students that were harassing her and some people in a restaurant, just calling them gringos. And but I have noticed, like when I first came to Mexico, and mi español es malo. I'm learning, but whenever I would pass someone on the street, like if you don't know this, it's very important. Say buenas noches, buenas tardes.
We say hello.
Dias. We say, well, in the States, we say hello. You say good afternoon or good, like, so at first when I got here, I just kept saying hola to people and they kept saying buenas tardes. So I learned to say buenas tardes, and like 90% or more of people would greet me back and smile and walk past, right? In the past few months, though, I would say it's gone down to about 80%. So people are still, and like Mexicans are probably too polite. Honestly, very, very, very nice people. but I have noticed that, some people are grumpy, with me. They look at me, like somebody told me on social media, they're like, just tell people you're Canadian. And I'm like, I can't with this accent. I'm too Southern. I can't get away with it. But for the most part, like Yucatecans have been lovely and Mexicans have been lovely.
We need to understand that we now are too guided by leadership.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, people are polluted by all this institutional harassment that it's coming from we know who.
Right. Well, and it's
So
interesting
it's
because
clear that people get a little bit influenced by it's a normal reaction.
sure, no, it's completely normal. I'm like, I get it. Like I'd be mad at me too. But yeah, one of the things I found is that a lot of people think that because Trump says that he says, oh, I won by a landslide. He did not win by a landslide. He won maybe, but he did not win by a landslide. But there's this sentiment that all Americans are Trump lovers. And when I've expressed that, like, no, I don't really like him, a lot of people can really like, what? No, like, no, like, a lot of us are here because we don't like what's going on there. We saw it coming, or a lot of people left during the first administration.
I can tell you a little story.
Yeah.
When George Bush came to Mexico,
Okay.
he put a aircraft carrier in front of Progreso, and he would come and go to the different places in a helicopter, and these very high-speed planes that make all this terrible noise were crisscrossing Merida during the 2 or 3 days that he was here, and it was a big noise, and everybody was asked to remain at home because, and the president, George Bush, never stepped foot really in Merida. He was going from location to location on this helicopter from the Air Force, and he didn't stay in any hotel here. He was always staying in the aircraft in front of Progreso, and the entire city was like under attack.
Right, yeah.
We couldn't have this conversation. We would be hearing these helicopters
and fighter pilots, and yeah.
A few months later, after that experience, I was with my son visiting Chichen Itza.
Okay.
And we saw this gentleman he was there with a beautiful lady, and he was assisted by, now I think they were bodyguards, but they were very, very low profile. Yeah. They were working with him, and he was with a very sweet English-speaking interpreter guy who was telling everything about Chichen Itza. Okay. And this man, without surveillance, without any special protection, he was leisurely walking and peacefully walking all over Chichen Itza.
Yeah.
And when you look at him closely, it was Jimmy Carter.
Oh, wow.
Just walking like any other tourist, visiting without any kind of harassment. And he was the president of the United States without any kind of protection or special protection, walking the ruins like any other tourist.
Yeah. So
that's Yucatan.
Yeah. He was the only president to ever come out of my state, Jimmy Carter, and was a. I don't know if he was a great president, but he was a great man. I think a lot of people have said that about him.
And that's what I'm telling you. It has to do with leadership.
It's
the perception.
It's the character of the leadership, and God help us all. But Rodrigo, thank you so much for this. I learned a lot today. I hope you guys learned a lot. If you have questions, I can put Rodrigo's contact information.
Yes, there are many ways to become resident other than income. So, but of course, there is an entire book of immigration law. So if you want to see if you qualify in any of the remaining programs, you can come here actually to study, to learn Spanish. You can get a study visa. You can get, if you belong to a minority And if you think you are being harassed, and this is going to be very interesting because all the trans and all these groups that are now being harassed
By the Trump administration, by the Republicans.
there are many systems to be able to give you protection and come to Mexico. So it's not only income, but if you have any question, we can make another program in order to talk about all these additional programs that are already in the Constitution, or send me a message and I will try to answer if you have any question.
Perfect. Yeah, I didn't know about all that.
Yes.
All right, y'all. Well, let us know what questions. Let us know if you want to see another one of these. Maybe we can do a Q&A next time. We'll have to do it remotely because I'm in Peru.
Well, it's going to be fun. Enjoy the ceviche.
All right.
Thank you. Take care. Welcome to Mexico.